Hi, welcome back to the channel. My name's Claire and I'm a senior lecturer in physiotherapy. And in this video, I'm going to talk through critical appraisal, which is really about what's the quality of the study. And this is an introduction to getting started. So, if we look at where we are in terms of the steps of doing a literature review systematically, we're kind of around that halfway point now. And this is about critically appraising the included study. So, this video relates to step number 5. Now, it's often worth doing your critical appraisal and your data extraction on a paper at the same time. And that's because you have to go quite deep when you're doing a critical appraisal. So, if you're going into that level of depth with the appraisal, you may as well go in and be pulling out the relevant data at the same time. So, watch this video and then go and watch the one on data extraction so that you know what I mean when I keep talking about data extraction. The reason I've done them separately is so that you're clear on what is expected from each step of the process. And sometimes what can happen if you've got lots of papers, actually you might find the quality of one of those papers is really poor. So because you've got enough other papers, you could probably afford to exclude that. But I will say that rarely happens with student literature reviews. That tends to be more if you're doing that high level, structured, like really structured, full on systematic review process. But just a heads up that can happen sometimes with the quality of the papers. So, what is critical appraisal? So, when we're talking about critical appraisal, we're really talking about what is the quality of the study. And the process of critical appraisal involves a checklist of questions that you are going to work through. And it's important because if a study has been conducted poorly, you're probably not going to give as much weight to it as you talk about it as you go through your review, in your discussion, etc. So, your job is to work through that checklist of questions, answer them as best as you can. It's a structured assessment, really, of the strengths and the weaknesses of the paper that you're including and working through. Now, the most important thing is you must select the appraisal tool which matches the study design. So, how are you going to do that? Now, it's tricky because there are many different critical appraisal tools. The key thing is to be aware and make sure you choose the right one. For example, if you have a qualitative paper, you need to make sure that you choose the qualitative appraisal tool, because if you were to choose the appraisal tool that was actually for a quantitative study, for example, randomized controlled trial, then actually the questions asked of that qualitative paper, they won't make sense and you'll just be putting no, not applicable. But actually it's because it's the wrong study design. So you must make sure that you choose the right study design for the paper that you have and that you're appraising. So, two of the best places to start, I would say, are the Critical Appraisal Skills Program, CASP, and the Joanna Briggs Institution. So, I've put a couple of screenshots here. So, if you go onto the CASP website, you can pick a study design, find it on CASP. And I think CASP are probably the best introduction for research. So, I think they're quite helpful. I've put a link in the description below so you can go in and grab that link from there. But you would just then look at this list and say, well, okay, I am doing randomized controlled trials. They're the studies that I've got. So you would select that checklist for your papers. And the other one I've said is the JBI, Joanna Briggs Institute. And that's similar. It's got a list of study designs. So you can go in and just select the one that is appropriate for the study that you are going to be looking at. Again, link in the description. Now, the researchers are really annoying in that they don't always tell you clearly what their study design is. So, I've made a video on the main types of quantitative and qualitative design to try and help you figure that out. So, please do go and check out those videos if you need a little bit of help. Really, you just have to give it a go. It's so difficult for me to guide you much further as it will really depend on your study designs. If you want to see a worked example of a critical appraisal, I have done one and recorded that for you. So please do check it out. You will be going through these questions. You're like, oh, I don't know the answers to these. So that's where you need to dig into the papers, dig into library books on research methodologies, talk to your peers, talk to your tutor. You As a novice researcher, you're not going to do a perfect critical appraisal. That's okay. Just accept that. And done is better than perfect. So just give it a go and see where you end up going with it. Signposting you. See my worked example on how to do a critical appraisal. I think my real take home messages for this are it can feel really subjective because it is quite subjective because it's asking you to make an academic judgment based on what you know about research to answer some of these questions. So that will come down to your personal judgment. you will have to do some digging around in your studies to find the answer. They won't necessarily be obvious. I find using the search function really helpful. So Command F, Control F on your keyboard if you're looking for a particular key phrase. Do use that to try and help you jump around the paper a bit, but you will have to dig in quite deeply. And as I've said, you may have to do some reading around research design to really understand what they're asking with each question and each point. But this is all part of your learning for research, and you will be much, much better as a qualified physio at knowing what papers are talking about because you've been through this process of critically appraising your own papers. So, all part of the learning, I'm afraid. Now, the write-up of the critical appraisal, so you've got the part of the critical appraisal in your methods, and essentially that is just what was the critical appraisal tool that you used. And then you've actually got the results section, and the critical appraisal in the results is formed of two parts. The first part is a written section on the quality of the included studies, and the second part that you need to include is a table of the quality of included studies where you've gone through and you present how you scored each question on each paper. And see a separate video on the quality write up. So, for doing your methodological quality, there is a bit of a knack to that. So, I've done a separate video around that. So, as I said, you will need to talk about it a little bit in your methods write up section. So, this is an example from Brenner's paper. So, the statement of methodological, she's got this statement about why she included it at the end. So, by reporting on the methodological quality of the included papers, readers are able to make an informed judgment about the trustworthiness of the findings and transferability of the research to other settings. So I just wanted to provide a kind of a bit of an explanation really on that. So this is a bit of a heads up for people doing critical appraisal for qualitative studies. So some qualitative researchers believe that you shouldn't do critical appraisal for qualitative because even if a study is of low quality, it will still have some valuable new knowledge. However, I think it's really important that you do critical appraisal on your qualitative studies and then report that because that's a transparency issue. And then whoever is reading that review can then assess the quality of the papers and know what weight they're going to be given to the discussion and findings and conclusion, etc. But just a note, some qualitative researchers are really anti it. So results table example, let me just give you a couple of examples here as to how you would present the results table for your critical appraisal. So this is example 1. So along the top, it's got all the study authors. Down the side, it's got the questions. And this was a particular checklist. This was a Downs and Black checklist for quantitative papers. And so it scored a 1, a 0, or unable to determine. So that's just an example for you to see how it can be presented. And then here's a second example for how you could present it. So I think this is from a qualitative CASP critical appraisal. So again, it's got the study authors along the top. It's got each of the individual questions for the critical appraisal down the side. And then you fill in those responses with a yes, no, or you for unable to determine again. So that's just another example of how you can be presenting the table. So again, over to you. Give it a go. Work with a friend for moral support. Ask your tutor for help, but just have a go at working through those papers, answering those questions as best you can, knowing that you won't necessarily get them perfect. You might not even get them 100% right, but the principle is there is so much learning in there for you, but you will have to dig in deep a little bit. But please do have a look at the one where I go through a worked example of it, because even though it's not a worked example of like your paper that you'll be included, at least you can see the process and the types of things we're thinking about as we do critical appraisal. So check that out and I hope it helps.